In this video, I will share the checklist that we use as a guide to know if we are qualified to apply for a K-1 visa and what are the requirements we put in our K-1 packet. This list is based on our actual experience while we are preparing for our K-1 packet application. Numbers 1 to 11 would apply to all K-1 applicants, while 12 to 16 would depend on either petitioner or beneficiary or both, means this would only apply to some, in which I will discuss later. And number 17 may not be mandatory but is highly encouraged because it would be something useful later on interview stage. Let's start with proof of U.S. citizenship. The U.S. petitioner must be able to prove he or she is a United States citizen. In this section, evidences can be a copy of a U.S. passport, certificate of naturalization, or birth certificate. Under the qualifications or eligibility, you have to meet these requirements. Both must be legally free to marry, physically met within 2 years, and income requirements. If the petitioner or beneficiary was ever married before, he or she must provide proof that any such marriage has been legally terminated through death, divorce, or annulment. This is usually proven with evidence such as a death certificate or divorce decree, annulment papers. If you're single, then include proof like affidavit of single status, or in Philippines we call it CENOMAR, Certificate of No Marriage. Physically met within 2 years. Proof of having met in person at least one time within the 2 years prior to filing the form. This doesn't mean you need to know each other for 2 years, just that within the last 2 years there was an in-person meeting. For example, in our case, we had our in-person meeting last September 2019. We filed our petition February 2020, so we had physical meeting for the last 4 to 5 months, so we met this requirement. Is it possible to apply for a K-1 visa without in-person meeting? Well, there are hardship waivers if you qualify, such as for medical conditions preventing travel. And also for some social customs reasons, like the in-person meeting goes against long-standing strict social customs for the beneficiary, so USCIS will consider this when deciding if you've met this claim. But in my opinion, that would put your application at risk, so if possible, exhaust all resources so that you can suffice the in-person requirement prior to filing. Third requirement under qualifications and eligibility is the income requirements. Some visas count on the alien's financial ability, but the K-1 visa counts on the U.S. petitioner's financial ability. They must meet the minimum income requirements or use alternatives to meet the requirement. So you can check the I-864P form for a current table of poverty guidelines, or you can also visit USCIS website. So these are the options that you can use if you don't meet the income requirements. Next is the I-129F form. So in the USCIS website, look for the I-129F petition for alien fiancé form. In here, you can download it, and it comes in 13 pages. Blue box is the expiration date, and the red box is the edition date. You can check the edition date on their website as well. Make sure you have the latest edition. USCIS will reject your application if you use an old form. You can also download instructions for Form I-129F so you can have a guide on how to fill out your form. This is the G1145, which is optional, but if you have this, it will help notify you when the USCIS receives and accepts your I-129F petition. Number 4 is cover letter. Basically, it's like an introduction. You introduce yourself, your fiancé, some biographical data, and what you're applying for. Number 5, index. Indexes are used to quickly locate data without having to search every page. And here's a sample of our index. Number 6 is the circumstances of meeting. So this is like an explanation of how you two met, where you met, and why you decided to marry. So it's like your love story. Number 7, proof of meeting. So these are proof of the legitimacy of the relationship. So these can include photos, travel evidences, and receipts. 8 is proof of an ongoing relationship. This is to show proof you're a genuine couple and not involved in a sham relationship. In this section, we have included some selected emails, chat and calls on Hangouts and Skype, some Facebook interaction, and gift exchange. The team developed a software as well to create a graph that would show all our chat and call logs available from Google Hangouts and Skype. Evidence of intent to marry. So these are evidences that you can include to convince USCIS agents and consular officers that the relationship is bona fide. Evidences would include letter of intent to marry, sworn statements written by and signed by each partner. In our case, we added more evidences to back up our letter of intent to marry. So you can check that out on my other video, Evidences of Intent to Marry. Next is the application fee. So this is a screenshot taken from the USCIS website. You may pay the fee with a money order, personal check, or cashier's check. 11. Passport size photos. See in your packet, both petitioner and beneficiary should include their passport size photo. As for me, I just went to a professional visa photo service to ensure that my photo meets all the requirements needed. 12 is the IMBRA, or the International Marriage Broker Regulation Act. So even if this doesn't apply to me and Tim, but all of us will encounter this question in filling out our I-129F form. So if you see page 8 of 13 in the I-129F form, so there's a question about the IMBRA. So it would be good to discuss this topic so you know if this applies to you or not. K-1 visa petitioners must disclose in their petition if they have met through a marriage broker. So if you and your fiancé met on a dating site that charges fees for providing dating, matrimonial, or matchmaking services, then that's considered to be a marriage broker. And if that is the case, you are required to submit a copy of the signed written consent form that the international marriage broker obtained from the beneficiary, authorizing the release of her personal account information to you. 13. Criminal history. If you had a criminal history, provide all documents if listed in the specified crimes. If you have been convicted of certain crimes or attempted them, you may be disqualified for a K-1 visa as per EMBRA. Although a criminal record is not an automatic reason for I-129F denial, it's going to be a difficult factor in your case, especially if you have a past history of domestic violence. The U.S. wants to make sure your fiancé won't suffer any abuse from you. Petitioner must disclose all or share their criminal history to their fiancé, so the fiancé is aware of their background before continuing to the K-1 visa application. When your application reaches the interview level, the consular will talk about your criminal history with your fiancé. Your fiancé should be aware of your past even before the interview, otherwise it is a sign of a non-bona fide relationship. 14. Previous marriage. If one of the applicants, either petitioner or beneficiary, or both, have been previously married before, so they have to provide proof that any such marriage has been legally terminated through death, divorce, or annulment. So provide documentation from both applicants or one of the applicants who have previous marriage. 15. Travel history. This would only apply to beneficiaries who have ever visited the U.S., so they have to provide entry and exit records, including I-9 form from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. 16. Translations, copies, notarization. Provide translations for foreign language documents. Fortunately, in our case, this doesn't apply to me since most of the government agencies or even companies here in Philippines, either private or public, they use business English on their documents. But this may apply to beneficiaries whose documents that they need to include in their packet is not written in English, so they need to translate that. And the last one, but not the least, 17. Copy of submitted packet. Make yourself a scan or copy of all final documents you send to the USCIS for your records. During the interview, the consul can ask you just about anything, any details that you have put on your application. So your extra copy can help you review whatever details you have included in your packet so you can be ready whatever random question they would ask of you. With your copy, you can track as well whatever section that needs updating. For example, on the interview, you have to bring an updated letter of intent to marry, and you also have to update your proof of an ongoing relationship. You have to take note that we are a stranger to the USCIS officer and consul, so putting great evidences on your packet would be good. Our packet will be judged twice. First is when your packet arrives USCIS. You will either be rejected, get an RFE, or approved and receive your NOAA 2. So these all would depend on your evidences on your application. So why not front load your packet? This doesn't mean you have to put too much or too little. It's more on quality. Don't base that on the number of pages. Same applies during the interview. Best relationships are all about teamwork, and we all need that in preparing for our K1 packet. So, good luck!